Pleasant good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Legendary Show. Good evening to the listening public. Good evening to those of us here on the island of Nevis, and to our sisters, our brothers and sisters over there in St. Kitts. Pleasant good evening to you. To our friends and families in the wider Caribbean region, we bid you a very special Monday evening, as well as our friends and families in the diaspora. I wish to say a special good evening to my dear aunt. I'm sure she's tuned in and listening, Janice Elvis Moore there in the UK, as well as my beloved uncle Vaden Jones there in North Carolina, USA, and of course not forgetting my beloved brother Duggan's masquerade man Cleone Stapleton there in New York. We trust and hope that everyone is having a wonderful Monday, and of course certainly not forgetting my beloved constituency, the good people there in Nevis 5, St. Thomas's Parish. I hope I bid you all a wonderful evening, and I hope you are having a wonderful start to the week. This evening we have a very special show lined up. We will extend the show for just about 2 hours this evening, because we have some issues that we wish to deal with that are confronting us as a people in our beloved country here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me. It's always a pleasure for me to be here with you on the Legendary Show. Normally the Legendary Show is on a Monday. That is the first Monday of every month. However, this evening we are doing a special 2-hour show. So we're going to get right into the show, but before we do that, of course we have to take care of a few housekeeping matters, and so I wish to take this opportunity to extend congratulations to all those who are celebrating a birthday or an anniversary today, and also for the rest of the week. We trust and hope that you will enjoy your special day. In that same token, I wish to also extend condolences to any family who may be grieving the loss of a loved one during this very difficult time. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. My mind goes to the family of the late Felton Griffin, also known as, what's his name again? Can't remember it right now. I'm just going to quickly confirm my notes here. Okay, it's not coming back to me right now, but I just felt on Griffin. Yes, Roller. How could I forget my dear friend Roller? Yes, and so he was a good friend of my family, and I just want to extend condolences to his family, to his sister Sharon. He was laid to rest on Saturday. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the funeral, but I am told that all accounts that he did have a very good send-off, and so we'll miss him dearly. I know those of you in Newcastle, the fishermen, those of you who worked at the water department, he was indeed a plumber, and so we are going to miss him, but may his soul continue to rest in peace. All right, before we get into the show, I just wish to thank the good people of St. Thomas's for the trust and confidence that they have placed in me as I continue to represent them as the elected representative for Nevis C5, that is St. Thomas's Parish. And I just wish to take you back a bit down memory lane. On the 28th of September 2023, I had the privilege and the distinct honor of participating in a very special sitting in celebration of our 40th anniversary as an independent nation at the House of Assembly on the island of Nevis. And so I just wish to just play that that recap of my presentation in the House for those of you who perhaps would have missed it. I think I delivered a very important message in terms of our attitude as parliamentarians and politicians in terms of nation building, and also, you know, the way we want to go forward and move forward as a people. And so I just want you to have a listen. I rise to make my contribution at this very special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly on the occasion of our 40th anniversary as an independent nation. I salute our nation for attaining this milestone. Madam President, to put things into proper perspective and some context, I must state for the record that I am 40 years old. And so it is safe to say that my entire life has been spent in an independent St. Kitts and Nevis. Obviously, Madam President, I am not in a position to speak with authority as some of the speakers before me today. However, Madam President, my research has revealed that with the attainment of independence on September 19, 1983, Nevis was able, after 100 years, to have its own legislature, this very assembly that we now sit in, Madam President. Nevis also benefited through the birth of the Nevis Island Administration. You see, Madam President, these two institutions gave considerable power to Nevisians to chart the path forward for our beloved island. For example, the establishment of the Nevis Island Administration, Nevis was able to have its own ministers of government, permanent secretaries to head its various ministries, heads of department, and directors. To put it simply, Madam President, Nevisians became empowered because, Madam President, we had full autonomy. We were able to govern and manage to some extent our own affairs. Madam President, over the years, we have come to take certain administrative matters and privileges for granted. But, Madam President, there was a time in our history when Nevisians had to travel to Bastille for a birth certificate, a police record even. Just imagine that, Madam President. Such things, I am sure all can agree that we are quite happy and elated that they are of the past. Madam President, it was because of the NIA that the government of the day on Nevis was able to bring the prestigious Four Seasons Resort in 1991, thus giving this island its first real payday and giving many women their first real payday. It is, perhaps, with some regret, that some may say, as the speaker before me, that through this empowerment of women, some male counterparts may have suffered. But, Madam President, we cannot regret the strides, particularly the economic strides that we have made in this little island through the establishment of the Four Seasons Resort. Sadly, Madam President, for more than 30 years later, Four Seasons remain the island's main payday entity. Perhaps, as we look beyond 40 years of independence, we ought to leave no stones unturned as we seek to bring another major mass employer to the shores of Nevis to drive the island's economy. Madam President, we are grateful for the strides that we have made as a small country in 40 years. Upon reflection, we must be grateful for being able to have access to running water in most of our households, almost all, perhaps all. Madam President, access to electricity, access to transportation, to the extent that almost every household has at least one family member who owns a vehicle. Access to technology, to the internet, access to the convenience and efficiency of banking service, access to health care. Although, Madam President, there is need for significant improvement, the completion of the new hospital wing is undeniably desirable for all Nigerians. Access to decent roads. We must admit, that we have come a long way from 2 strips or even lack of paved roads. Access to quality education. Madam President, I can go on and on and on, but in the interest of time, we must be thankful, we must be grateful that we have indeed come from far. But we cannot, Madam President, afford to relax now. We must continue to build solidly on the foundation that was laid before us by our forefathers. Madam President, we can all agree that the list for improvement is not exhaustive. However, I wish to focus on one aspect or one item on that list, and that is education. Because education, I believe, and perhaps you may agree, is the root or the pillar of any progressive nation. Madam President, the Nevis Sixth Form was established on the 13th day of October 1980, 3 years before our nation attained its independence. Today, our Sixth Form's performance compares favorably with similar institutions in the Leeward Islands. However, the time has come for us to go beyond the arches of the Nevis Sixth Form. We must seek to establish our own technical and vocational college. The focus must be on the incorporation of technology to develop essential labor skills to make our people more self-sufficient. Madam President, being able to provide comprehensive educational training is the gateway to success for Nevis. Our people must be empowered, as was done in the past, to build a solid economy on small business productivity. It is a necessary means to economic diversification to complement our tourism and financial service sectors. Madam President, as I close my brief presentation, I turn to the need for political maturity in our politics to assist us in our endeavors to continue to develop maturely. The constant cursing and mudslinging which characterized our politics in the 1980s, 90s, and to a large extent now must end. If it is that our society, one, accepts certain level of maturity and responsibility from individuals when they attain the age of 40, shouldn't we as a people expect our politicians to be more mature and responsible in the way that we conduct ourselves? Yes, it is okay and perhaps desirable for politicians to disagree, but that should not mean that we become disagreeable and engage in character assassination. It shouldn't mean, Madam President, that because we differ politically, that we cannot have open and mature conversations or dialogue which will advance the national agenda. Madam President, I have made a conscious and deliberate decision that I want to see greater maturity in the politics here in Nevis, and by extension, the wider federation. Madam President, as we move beyond 40 years of independence in this country, I want to be a part of that change that will result in our politics and our politicians showing greater political maturity. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our future generations. Madam President, our constituents and the general public will be the wider judges. On that note, Madam President, I take this opportunity to congratulate and to salute our beloved nation on this, our 40th anniversary of independence. May it please you, Madam President. And so just to recap, I am your host, Cleone Stapleton-Simmonds, and that was my presentation at the special sitting for our 40th anniversary in the Nevis Island House of Assembly. Now, this evening, the topic is, we are speaking about my journey, my political journey as a parliamentarian now for 3 years, very young in the game, and disappointments and expectations. So I just want to give you just a brief history of who I am, my background, and perhaps why I made a conscious decision to enter elective politics. Now, I just want you to know that it was not an easy decision. I made many sacrifices, both personal sacrifices as well as financial sacrifices, in order to be here to represent the good people of Nevis 5. And it is a role that I am truly very honored and humbled at the same time to fulfill. But I just want people to understand that it is a job that I take very, very seriously, because it is not easy to represent people, all people, not just any political party. Once you become an elected representative, you represent all of the people of the constituency of which you're serving. So I just wanted to make that clear. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I hail from the beautiful village of Cotton Ground in the parish of St. Thomas. I was raised by my grandmother, Eulalie Moore, after the passing of my biological mother when I was only 2 months old. My grandmother was a very strong, avid supporter of the Nevis Reformation Party. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, the NRP was the only party that we knew. As a child, that was the only political party that I really understood to bring development to Nevis. My grandmother had an obsession with people like Sir Simeon Daniel, our national hero, as well as Mr. Joseph Parry. As a matter of fact, to me, and just as a light joke, I was of the view that Mr. Joseph Parry was perhaps a god, because the way she spoke about him, indeed, one was left with the impression that Mr. Parry perhaps could do no wrong. And so that is the environment of which I grew up in. Eulalie was the meal maker, meal provider for numerous of the Nevis Reformation Party functions. I recall her making Johnny cakes, saltfish, goat water, cook up. My uncle at that time, Mr. Vaden Jones, was one of the founding members, if I recall correctly, and I stand to be corrected if that is not the case, of the Nevis Reformation Party youth arm. I recall as a child, even before I could even dream about voting, attending meetings at school. I would participate along with my other friends in doing our best to support the Nevis Reformation Party. We would run around the schoolyard saying vote NRP, vote NRP, and at that time we really couldn't vote, and I don't even think that we understood what the process was. My father has always been an avid supporter of the Nevis Reformation Party. Many of you know him as Ashley Bummer Nisbet. He has never transitioned. He has never not supported the NRP. All of my life, I believe he is now 75 or 76 years old, and he has always supported and voted for the Nevis Reformation Party. Now, I say that so that people can get an appreciation of how dear the Nevis Reformation Party was to myself and to my family. Okay, I have never been, as I see some supporters now of the NRP, transitional nor transactional. My family really was a real deal true supporters of the Nevis Reformation Party. When I attained the age of 18, and I believe the election at that time was held when I was perhaps maybe 19 or 20 back in 2006. Forgive me if I don't recall the precise date. I believe that was the first election that I was eligible to participate in. And there could have been no question as to who I would support, which political party. There wasn't even a discussion. Naturally, as for my older siblings, as well as my aunt and uncles and my older cousins, once you grew up in St. Thomas's, the expectation was that you would support and vote for the Nevis Reformation Party. And so that went without debate, without discussion. Now, for me, my political journey really started about roughly 2019 effectively. However, I just wish the general public to know that as far back as I can recall, perhaps 2017, I was approached by numerous members of the Nevis Reformation Party to get involved in the party, as well as to be a potential candidate for the St. Thomas's Parish Nevis 5. I recall distinctively an occasion where Mr. Hector, I'm not sure if at that time he was already the party leader, but I recall it was about February 2018 when he entered my office in Charlestown, my law office, and he came to, I guess, advocate and to appeal to me that I should get involved in the party. I recall him saying that Mr. Parry will be retiring soon and they were looking for a replacement in St. Thomas's. At that time, he did not know, and I did not disclose that I was with child. And I recall standing up from behind my desk, and when I stood up, we both burst out in laughter, because naturally, because of my state, I was disqualified. And so I just want people to understand it has been historically as far back as that time, around the period 2017 2018. Now I recall it was sometime in June 2019. At that time I was an employee at the Bank of Nevis in the compliance department, and I came downstairs, I think, to run an errand. And I was standing in the line with other customers, and standing before me was Mr. Joseph Parry. And instantly, I believe, I had a thought that, perhaps I should just go back upstairs. But when I saw Mr. Parry in front of me, naturally I greeted him and I said, Mr. Parry, how are you? How are you doing? And he said, oh, Cleone, you've been trying to avoid me, but I really want to have a serious talk with you, because I believe the time has come for you to get involved in the NRP. I've been looking for a replacement for myself because I am getting old and I see no other person who can replace me but you. So I want you to come and have a chat with me. Of course, if I am to be truthful, I must say to you that I was a bit embarrassed and taken a bit by surprise, because whilst I accept what Mr. Parry was saying, I did not believe that that was the time nor the place to have that particular conversation. And so I quickly assured Mr. Parry that I would call him, or I would come and see him, and then I hurriedly ran back up the steps to my office. And it was really that time when the journey began. Naturally, I perhaps ignored Mr. Parry for some months, if I may admit, and I did not immediately go to see him, neither did I call him. A matter of fact, I recall distinctively it was perhaps about August 2019 when Mr. Hector came to me a second time. And he said to me, Cleone, you have to make a decision as to whether you're going to get involved, because Mr. Parry has informed me that he is seriously considering retiring at the latter months of the year. I don't believe he said the end of the year. He did say sometime in the year. I believe it was October, if my memory served me right. And he indicated that you were a person of interest and you were the person that he is looking at to replace him. I then reluctantly, I believe, gave Mr. Hector some excuse, but I did promise him that I would go and see Mr. Parry and have a conversation with him. I did go and visit Mr. Parry. I recall it was in September 2019. I recall that distinctively because at that time I had left the Bank of Nevis and then transitioned to the Bank of Nevis International to be the compliance manager. And so therefore it was at that time that I had a conversation with Mr. Parry at his house. The first conversation that I had with Mr. Parry was just basically I wanted to know, what was his expectation, what was this all about, what would I have to do. Even though I was a supporter of the Nevis Reformation Party at that time, I was not involved in any of the party's constituency branches or any of the activities. I would go to meetings, I would vote, I would give advice to candidates when necessary to do so. I had a very good relationship with Mr. Hector at that time, as well as Mr. Parry. I recall in the 2017 election, I felt things were not going the way I perhaps would have liked them to go. I felt that the party at that time was focusing too much on a particular candidate of the CCM, and I did send a text message to Mr. Parry to indicate to him the party is spending too much time on this candidate. You need to talk about the issues, ventilate the issues, let the people know about the issues. The focus should not be on any one person. Now, my second meeting, at that first meeting with Mr. Parry, I indicated to him that I'm not going to make a decision. I'm not going to say yes. I'm not going to say no. What I will do, I'm going to go out in the constituency in the parish of St. Thomas. At that time, I had recently migrated back into St. Thomas's to live there. I was living in Gingerland in Handyswood at that time, my husband being from Gingerland. Naturally, we had our house in Handyswood, and so I then went back to St. Thomas's sometime before because my grandmother was ill, and so I was really back and forth as far back as 2016. So because I took the job at the Bank of Nevis International, and that was situated in Cotton Ground, I then moved back to my residence, the place where I grew up after my grandmother passed away, and so that I can have easy access going to work back and forth. So I made that decision, that conscious decision. I went out in the community. I asked several persons. I recall having an initial discussion with my uncle Vaden, and then of course my brother, and of course different people within the constituency whose view I respected. And the feedback was great. People said, yes, you're a daughter of the soil, and we do believe that you should come because we will support you. And it was on that basis that I decided, I was swaying, did not make a decision as yet, that perhaps if I did undertake the task that I would get the support. I recall having a second meeting with Mr. Parry, and this time I was accompanied by Mr. Dave Simon. I hope he can forgive me for calling his name, but I am trying my best to give a precise and factual account as possible. So I went to meet with Mr. Parry a second time. This time I had Mr. Simon with me, and I think at that time my concern was that this was perhaps around late October, November, that I needed a bit more time. Mr. Parry had indicated that he wanted to resign effective the end of December. That would have been December 31st, 2019. I felt that that perhaps was not sufficient time for me to prepare as a newcomer to go into the constituency and to do the work that was needed and required. Many persons may say, and some have even argued to date, that it is St. Thomas's that is an NRP seat. For me, I don't take anything for granted, and anybody who knows me know I really don't. Okay, everything is in politics is luck and chance. You can't assume anything, so I never really took that perception. For me, if you're going into something, you have to be willing to put in 110% regardless of the circumstances, and that really was my attitude. That was my thought process, that was my attitude, and that's really what I did. I do recall during the interview that Mr. Parry, he had looked very tired. He was fed up. He said that he had enough and he just wanted to get away from politics because he wanted to retire in peace. At that time, he mentioned that the loss of Mr. Herman Liebert, Bobby Liebert, was devastating for him, and he wanted, he felt it was time for him to retire. I recall asking Mr. Parry if it was at all possible for him to just hold on until the federal election, because I was aware that the federal election was constitutionally due in 2020, and so it would have been perhaps more feasible, and it would have given a bit more time to prepare for the local election that would eventually follow the federal election in 2020. He stated that he really couldn't, he was tired and he wanted to go. Now, my mindset at that time was that, okay, Cleone, your party is calling on you. Mr. Parry is tired. He looked as if physically and mentally he was drained, and I think for me, I saw it as an opportunity to help. And so I decided that I would come. That's when I made that decision. Now, sometime in December, early December in 2019, I don't think I had quite given the undertaking as yet, or the commitment that I would fully come as yet. I recall I was not present at the Jessup's Christmas tree lighting, and I recall someone called me and said, well, Cleone, how come you're not at the Jessup's Christmas tree lighting? Mr. Parry made an announcement that he is making a recommendation for you to replace him as the representative or the candidate for St. Thomas's. I said, well, okay, we did have those discussions, but he's making a recommendation. A number of persons were upset with that approach, naturally so. And some people were of the view, particularly the then St. Thomas constituency executive, that Mr. Parry brought me into the party without consulting them. That was not so. I strongly disputed that, but to date, some people are still not convinced. Mr. Parry made a recommendation. And if anyone understands how elective politics works and how party politics work, no one person, and especially a person at that time who is outside of the executive and who is not an active member, can bring anybody into the party. Someone can make a recommendation, then it is up to the constituency branch as well as the party executive to really ratify any nominations that were made. Mr. Parry indicated to me that I should meet with the executive body of the St. Thomas's constituency branch. I recall arranging a meeting and I met with them. From the onset, I just want everyone to know that the feedback from that meeting, it was not good. My initial meeting, I sensed that they felt that somehow I was being forced upon them. And I explained, I recall persons, I don't want to call names, but I recall Mr. Hugh Charles was there, as well as Miss Bernadette Lawrence. I'm not sure, I can't remember distinctively what were their roles in the executive. I think one was either the president or the vice president, and then I recall Patrick Best being there, as well as some other persons. And I went, I made my pitch, I made my presentation, I stated who I am, I stated the circumstances, and I told them that if they were to give me their support, that I definitely would be able to deliver the seat. It's going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to take some time for me to really get back into the community. But if I had their support and they were willing to work with me, then I would be willing to work with them. Fast forward, I do believe that they did make the recommendation to the party executive, and my nomination was accepted and by the executive, and I then became the candidate for Nevis 5 for the Nevis Reformation Party. I say all of that to say, and so that people can understand that at present I am no longer part of the Nevis Reformation Party, not solely through my own doing, but simply because I was evicted, ejected, whatever you want to call it, from the Nevis Reformation Party. And I'm going to get into that whole history because I believe it is important for me to tell my story, as a number of persons have taken it upon themselves to tell my story and to be an advocate on my behalf. And some of the things that they have been saying are not true. And so I want to put an end and completely dispel those rumors, those false accusations and allegations. I understand that everyone has their own political agenda, particularly those who are new, transitional and transactional to the Nevis Reformation Party. I get that. That is the nature of our politics in Nevis today. So I am going to play a soundbite, just a clip from an interview that was done with Mr. Parry recently. I believe it was done it aired on October 1st, 2023 on YouTube, with Mr. Mervyn Hanley, who I view as one of those persons who is indeed transitional and transactional to the Nevis Reformation Party. Because those of you who may recall, and if you remember your history and if you're paying attention to the politics, Mervyn Hanley was one of those CCM activists. He was one of those persons out there who actively supported the CCM. A matter of fact, on 2 occasions I recall him serving as press secretary to former Premier Van Samri, as well as present Premier Mark Brantley. And so he was the PRO of the party and basically the mouthpiece of the CCM as recent as the June 2020 elections. Mervyn has since transitioned, and he is now an active member, perhaps in high ranking, of the Nevis Reformation Party. And so that is why I use the term transactional and transitional, because I don't know Mr. Hanley to always be an avid supporter of the Nevis Reformation Party. So I want you to take a listen.
What was that period like for you in all of this back and forth and that turbulence?
Very, very difficult, very difficult. Unfortunately, I was not in a position to advise her, or let me say that I don't feel that she had confidence in me, because maybe I wasn't saying the things that she wanted to hear. Perhaps she was listening to too many persons. My position on that, it was simply this. Janice is an older person. Cleone is a younger person. Janice won the convention by democratic means, won the leadership at the convention by democratic means. What Cleone should have done was to step back, focus on our constituency, try to help the party to get into government, and present herself as a future leader. That's what she should have done. That's what she should have done. I don't know who advised her, and unfortunately, whatever advice they gave, I don't think was the best advice. And she's going to have a difficult time.
And you do believe that the people of St. Thomas's will be very unforgiving to her in the next local election?
Well, let me put it this way. They are NRP supporters. They are NRP supporters. St. Thomas's is the heart of NRP. And they will continue to support the Nevis Reformation Party.
There are calls for her to resign the seat. Do you agree with that and have a by-election or a fresh election? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, our constitution does not provide for that. I have difficulty with someone running under the umbrella of a political party, in this instance NRP, and then distancing themselves from the party. No matter what the constitution says, no matter how you put it, we all know that the name of NRP, especially in St. Thomas, is a powerful name. And that people will vote for a candidate even if they're not too familiar with the candidate, as long as that candidate is running for the Nevis Reformation Party.
Okay, so there you have it, where Mr. Parry stated, and he gave his opinion, of course, about myself and the impasse. And it's quite surprising that this is now coming in the month of October, when the impasse really took place in January. So it is coming some 10 months later. Mr. Parry has found his voice, and he's now able to speak about the impasse and his feelings and what really happened during that whole scenario. Now, I just want to address this particular statement that was given by Mr. Joseph Parry. We did not play the entire clip. There were some other things that were said. For example, Mr. Parry alluded that I crossed the floor in the parliament. That was not played, of course, because that is a matter that perhaps would have some legal contention sometime in the future, because that is not true. And for those of you who can access the entire statement or the entire interview with Mr. Hanley, it's on YouTube. It was aired on the 1st of October 2023, and so you can look it up. And I just wish to state for record purposes that I am not a part of CCM. I have not crossed any floor in Parliament. Those statements are untrue. The last time I was in Parliament, as I indicated at the start of the show, was September 28th. This year, 2023, and I believe that I did appear as a member of the opposition, and I presented as a member of the opposition. Also, I just want to say that I have not turned my back on NRP. NRP took some steps after I decided to make a decision to conditionally and temporarily withdraw support from the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party after the local elections on December 12, 2022, when NRP, she and myself, successfully contested and won our seats. And there was an issue about the appointment of a senator, and I temporarily withdrew my support. Within less than 6 weeks, the Nevis Reformation Party executive made a decision that they should suspend me from the Nevis Reformation Party, and so they took some disciplinary actions, and then some 3 months later they came back and evicted me from the party. So I do not think that it is fair and truthful for Mr. Parry to say that I turned my back on the NRP. Everything that happened after the impasse was the doing of the executive, led of course by its then party chairman, Mr. Hensley Daniel, as well as its leader, the Honorable Dr. Janice Daniel. Now, I just want to clarify a few things from Mr. Parry's statement, okay? He stated that I should, Janice being an older person, that I should have basically give way to Janice and wait my turn. Now, I just want to put certain things into context. On September 13th, 2020, there was a convention. The NRP, the Nevis Reformation Party, had a convention. At that time, I was a sole elected member representative for the NRP, having been duly elected in a by-election on March 5th, 2023. Now, during that time, I contested the leadership, and Dr. Daniel, a newcomer, didn't have any footprint within the party, not that I know of. I was not even aware that she was a supporter. And just to go back a bit, I recall when I was contesting the by-election in February 2020, I recall the then party leader Roberto Hector said to me, "Cleone, you need someone. Do you have a campaign manager?" And I said, "No." "Do I need one?" He said, "Yes, you need someone who can help you with your campaign, just someone who would be able to take phone calls and just organize your campaign for you, because it is important during the election. You won't have time, so you need that person." I then said to him, "Well, who could I get?" And he recommended Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge. And I said to him, Janice, I don't know Janice to be political. I knew of Janice because obviously she was a director of the Bank of Nevis. I didn't really know her too much personally, but I knew of her, and I recall us doing a sales transaction where I purchased a piece of land from her at some point back. So I knew of Janice. I recall meeting Janice at her cousin's Bess Daniel shop in Banscott. And I said to her, "Janice, I would like to know, I was asked to reach out to you. I want to know if you would be able to help me with the campaign in terms of being my campaign manager." Janice was naturally startled by my comments, and she said, "Well, Cleone, no, I'm not a politician. I'm not actively involved in politics. I don't like politics. I'm not a people person. I've never been out there. If I wanted to come to politics, I really would have come a long time ago. I don't mind supporting from behind, but I'm not really that person to be out there in the forefront, and I don't have an interest." And so I left that at that. I reported back to Mr. Hector, and I said I did have a conversation with Janice, and she stated that she is not interested in politics. And this was around February, just before the by-election in March. I left that there. After the federal elections in June 2020, I recall Janice calling me up one day. It was in June, maybe in June, could have been July, June, and she said, "Cleone, I want to have a meeting with you. Is it okay for me to come and see you?" And I said, "Yes, you can meet me at my work at the bank." And she did come, and we had a brief meeting. She said that she have an interest in coming in to the Nevis Reformation Party, but she must come in at the top. I said, "What do you mean by that?" She said she wanted to come in as a leader, because if she do come, she will have to make a lot of sacrifices. I recall her at that time stating that she had a US passport and she would have to give up those things, and the conversation went on. I said to her, "Well, okay, I think it's best for you to talk to the constituency. I asked her which constituency she had an interest in running in, and she said it was St. James. And I said, well, the best thing for you to do is really to have a conversation with, your constituency. At that time, I must admit that I did not have an interest in the leadership of NRP. I had just won a seat, contested a by-election. I had just participated and assisted with the federal election, and leadership was really the farthest thing from my mind. It was not something that I had an interest in at that time. I was of the view that perhaps Mr. Hector or even Mr. Daly or somebody more senior within the party would have continued the leadership of the party. I became interested in the leadership of the party after I realized, well, all of the veterans were bowing out. They had no interest in the leadership, and so therefore, because I was the only person there with a seat at that particular time, I was asked by my constituency, well, Cleone, put yourself up. I did so. I put myself up for leadership. Mr. Parry stated that it was a democratic process. To some extent, I agree with him. The process was one that was democratic on paper, but the convention itself and the way that it was conducted, in my view, it was not so democratic. Because for me, I sat and I assessed the Nevis Reformation Party. And before I get into the convention, I just wish to say it for the record that having entered the party, I was picking up a lot of red flags. Things that I really didn't agree with, the way that the party did certain things. There was, to me, in my view, no structure. And I realized quickly that the party had a way of breaking its own rules. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that in a few minutes. At the convention on the 13th day of September 2020, I recall that there was a nuance in the procedure. For example, I recall the position for the deputy chairman of the party, that person was actually nominated on the day of convention at the time when nominations was closed. Now, the party constitution laid out the procedure for nominations of persons who want to serve on the executive body of the party. And much to my surprise, at that time, I really didn't know what was going on. There was a bit of a chaos, and I recall I was uncomfortable to the extent that at some point I was on the floor with the mic and I was asking what was the procedure. I didn't fully understand nor appreciate what was happening, but what was really happening was that the party had nominated someone to be the deputy chairman on the floor at the convention. They moved a motion at the time when nomination was closed. That person never really got an opportunity to campaign for the position, but at the same time I realized that their name was placed on the ballot, and I said to myself, you know what, just as I suspected before, this party really do not follow their own procedures. They make their own rules, they codify them in a constitution, and then they go and they break them. I recall, I think it was Mr. Hensley Daniel at that time. He was vying for chairmanship of the party, and he stood up and he said, well, the convention is the highest body of the party, and therefore the convention can make a decision to nominate someone on the floor. At that time I said okay, I didn't agree with it. I also noticed that there were members coming within the party to say that they were members of the executive, and I had never seen them at an executive meeting. I did not know them to be members of the executive. So there was, a bit of, as typical with NRP, nothing is unusual. It's just the way the party conduct themselves and the way that they do things, a bit of folly. And I said, I have to think twice about this party, because the way that they do things is not in keeping with the standard that I am accustomed to. I want people to remember I am an attorney at law, and I am also at that time a compliance officer. And so I am accustomed to strict procedures, strict rules, people doing what they were supposed to do. Okay? And so for me, I was taken aback. I was on the floor. I had some comments, and then I said, you know what, I don't understand what's happening here. So I left it. With the benefit of hindsight, and knowing who I am today and the person that I am and what I stand for, if at that time I really understood what NRP was trying to do with the convention and the results, I would have simply said, listen, I'm not going to participate in this process. I believe you have the best person before you suited to lead you. I cannot engage in these type of activities, and I would have left. But for me, everything has been a learning curve. It has been a learning experience. So it is not true 100% for Mr. Parry to say there was a democratic process. As a matter of fact, the very next day after the convention, Mr. Parry called me. And he said, we're having a conversation. He said, how you feel? I said, well, it was pretty close enough, I believe, at that time. Janice might have won by maybe 8 or 9 votes. I don't exactly recall. But what was instructive is that Mr. Parry said to me, well, Janice was not happy with the result because she expected a blowout, just the same way as Hector did daily back in 2018. I said, really? I said, okay. I said, well, if she expected a blowout, well, who probably saw that blowout? And I think the conversation ended then. I say all of that to say that sometimes people don't get the full picture and the full story of the Nevis Reformation Party and the way the party conduct itself and conduct its affairs. And I just want to remind the listening public that it perhaps would not be surprising that this is the very same party that had an election petition case decided against it, where an entire government was overturned. The NRP had to go back to the polls in 2013, and that resulted in the CCM getting an opportunity to be in government again because the party has a history of not following proper rules and procedure. That didn't come from me. That came from a court case. A judge of competent authority higher up, Court of Appeal judge, made that decision, not me. And so, to continue along the line of what Mr. Parry said, I take issue with the fact that he stated that I should wait because of age and because of that, because everyone kept saying that, Cleone, you can wait. But I just want to ask those persons out there, how fair is it for me to sit in a party that, first of all, does not value me? A party where persons are totally against you, especially in the executive. This issue, or the hatred, and I'm going to use the word hatred because that is what it is, and it had played out now in the general public, in the space, in social media, that this particular party, the Nevis Reformation Party, had a hatred beyond depths imaginable for me, Cleone Stapleton-Simmonds, the representative for Nevis 5. I recall sending Mr. Parry a text as far back as the 11th of July, and I still have that text, 2020, in my phone today, where I said to him, Mr. Parry, I am ready to leave the Nevis Reformation Party. You know, sometimes you go on a job and the probationary period for a job is 3 months, and after 3 months you're able to make an assessment, as well as your employer, they are able to make an assessment of your performance. And within that 3 months I made an assessment of NRP, and I said, listen, I'm not sure how much longer I can last in this party. The party way of doing things is not in sync with my principles and my values. And I said that to him. I sent him a text. I said, listen, the kind of things that I'm seeing, the kind of hatred towards me, I am ready to leave. Even during the leadership battle, I recall one prominent lawyer from Jessup Village having a conversation with me, senior lawyer, and he said, Cleone, I see what the party did to you, the kind of things that they said about you during the leadership battle, the aggression, the animosity, the hatred, the fact that people were out there saying all manner of things about you. He even went further to say, I am not sure that you are aware of all the things that they are saying about you, but they have really maligned you and said a lot of things about not only myself but my husband, my family. And I said, I'm quite aware. I am fully aware, but at the end of the day, I have a duty to the people of St. Thomas's who elected me, and so I am going to continue to focus on my constituency, and I am going to continue to serve the people. It wasn't easy. I had little or no support, especially when Dr. Daniel became the leader of the party and a new executive was formed. I recall one of the candidates telling one of my close friends who confided in me that she stated that she don't know what it is about Cleone, but they don't seem to like her in the party. They have a dislike for her. And I said, I am quite aware, because what people need to understand was happening in the Nevis Reformation Party at that time. The party was being controlled by an outside executive, and I can speak freely and publicly about this because I was approached by a group of people as far back as July 2020, and I was invited to a meeting. I'm not going to say who was at the meeting publicly just yet. And the crux of the meeting was that an idea was put forward by one of the allegedly major financiers of the party, and he indicated that there should be an executive that really makes decision for the party in terms of fundraising, in terms of functions, and that the party executive should play the role of rubber stamping whatever decision that executive made. I recall stating at the meeting, listen, this is going to create a lot of confusion, because what would happen in the event that the party executive does not agree with the outside party executive? That is chaos. I'm not going to be involved in it. I remember not being able to sleep that night after that meeting. I had some discussions with my husband, and I then sent a text to that financier, and I said, listen, I don't feel comfortable. I don't agree with this. I think the focus really should be on trying to set policies and focus on the messaging so that we can win the next election. We should not be here plotting to have internal conflicts within the party. I still have those messages in my phone to date. If I need to, in any event, provide proof or evidence of them, I have them. And from that day, I can tell you that the attitude of that person significantly changed towards me. I think they realized that I was not going to be a messenger nor an errand girl for any particular person in the Nevis Reformation Party. I recall that this particular individual used to call me almost on a daily basis, and the conversations would go, Cleone, the big man, say that you're not going forceful after Matt Brantley enough. And one day I said, well, who's this big man? And I was told, and that big man was a politician in St. Kitts. And I said, listen, I was not brought into the Nevis Reformation Party to be any puppet, any messenger for anybody. I am going to do things accordingly and as I see fit. So it was not surprising to me when I saw Dr. Daniel came and she grew an instant interest in becoming the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party. Mr. Parry also stated that I should have focused on my constituency. I don't recall that there was ever a time that I was never focused on my constituency. As a matter of fact, and if people were to be honest, especially the people of St. Thomas's, I have worked tremendously and tirelessly in that constituency. People walk up to me every day and they say, Cleone, we have seen your work. We see the work that you put in. Because remember, I told you, I never took it as if it was a safe seat. I don't believe any seat in Nevis is safe. Elections can go either way. You never know when you're dealing with people. Some may feel, okay, it's safe because, as Mr. Parry said, the people in St. Thomas's, they are NRP and they vote NRP. That may be true to a certain extent, but have Mr. Parry considered the recent trend? Have he considered that a lot of the older, strong, diehard NRP supporters, that they are dying out? Some of them are very sick, some of them cannot vote, some of them don't participate. A number of persons have migrated overseas. Have he considered that there's a younger generation now who not really loyal to any particular party? They are looking for the candidate and the person or party who will serve their best interest. That is the nature of politics today. Our people have become really transactional and transitional. But if that is the view of Mr. Parry, I certainly, because he is an elderly person, because he is the person who brought me to the party, because he's someone who I have had a relationship with for a number of years as a father figure and someone who I respected and looked up to, I would say I respect his views and his opinion. But I just want to warn him, as well as those persons who may share that same sentiments, that the landscape and the trajectory of the constituency is fast changing. In the recent election, local election, you would recall the CCM candidate got 500 votes. Never happened in St. Thomas's before. Luckily for me, I was able to make history and I was able to add an additional 200 votes on top of what Mr. Parry was accustomed to getting, between the region of 550. That did not come easy. I had to knock on everybody's doors. I had to convince people, those who were not so convinced, to vote for the party itself, but to believe in the candidate and believe that I can bring a difference to the landscape of politics here in Nevis. And that is what I advocated. That is what I promised the people of Nevis 5, and that is what I continue to promise them. I continue to be, promise to be, and pledge to be a servant of the people, all of the people, not just party people. But once you become a representative, especially a representative on the opposition bench, you are for all of the people of Nevis, because you have to go out there and you have to basically defend the people against the government. You have to truly advocate for them. Okay, you have to be their voice, because that is what it requires. You have to be able to compromise and to negotiate and to beg and to plead on behalf of the people. And I have demonstrated time and time again that I am willing to do that, regardless as to what it takes for my people. And that is the young people over there in St. Thomas's, because at the end of the day, everything that we are doing here collectively, as parliamentarians, as politicians, and even individually, it has to be in the best interest of the people, the existing generation now and the younger generation. Mr. Parry also went on to state that when he was asked a question by one transactional and transitional Mervyn Hanley, that if I should resign the seat. And I want to address that, because I want people to remember the facts. Okay, there was an impasse in January 2023. During the inauguration of Parliament, a senator was not appointed simply because the party leader failed to command my support. Now, Section 58, subsection 2, C, I believe, of the Constitution, that is the St. Christopher and Nevis Constitution, it placed the onus on the leader of the opposition to do something. So any person desiring to be the leader of the opposition, once they duly qualify, and that is they have the number of seats required and you need a minimum of 2, they have a duty or an obligation under the Constitution to command the support of the other person. The onus is not on the other person, and so a lot of people got it wrong. It's on the leader really effectively to command the support, and it says command, not demand. So in using the term command, you can command support by a number of ways: through negotiation, through compromise, whatever it takes to ensure that you become the leader of the opposition. And the leader of the opposition is not a role solely for a party. Okay, so the leader of the opposition is quite distinct and separate and apart from the leader of a political party. It's a different role. When you become the leader of the opposition, you are the leader of the opposition for all of the people, including the people who did not vote for you. And I think sometimes we confuse that. Okay, people might think the leader of the opposition is just for a particular party. It is not so. The leader of the opposition, you are representing, just as the premier is representing the entire island of Nevis. He is the leader of the opposition in the federal parliament, and therefore he has to represent all of those persons who do not necessarily share the government's interests, and even those who do, all of the people. So I just wanted to make that clear, and so it was a very crucial and important role. Now, the good people within the NRP executive, in all of their wisdom, place the obligation and the onus only on myself, the other elected representative, to do something, but completely omitting and disregarding the function of the leader of the party to ensure her responsibility and her accountability to ensure that she was able to be appointed as the leader of the opposition. That could not have been on one person solely. Surely she had a responsibility, because it takes two. I recall when this matter first came up, and I have said this publicly on numerous occasions, Mr. Parry stated that I did not seek his advice, and that is not true. That is absolutely false, and he knows that. One of the first persons that I called, and I recall it was December 13th, the day after the election, I said to Mr. Parry, I called him and I said, Mr. Parry, I have an idea as to how we can go forward as it relates to the leader of the opposition. He said, okay, Cleone, what's that? I said, well, since it's Jadis and I who have to decide, I believe it will be good. I have no difficulty supporting her, but perhaps I can be given the opportunity to choose the senator. He said, okay, well, I have no difficulty with that. It's you and she who has to decide. The two of you must come to a consensus. He said, who do you have in mind? I said, well, I was looking at Ronaldo Bartlett. I think he would be a good candidate, seeing that he did have an interest in being a candidate, and also he worked in the office of the opposition with both yourself and myself. Mr. Parry had no objections. As a matter of fact, at that point, he was the one who told me that Ronaldo really had an interest in being the senator as far back as 2017, but at that time, the party, only having one seat, did not qualify. Now, many of you perhaps would not have known that Mr. Parry, despite the disqualification, would have written to then Premier Brantley and had negotiations and discussions with him to have a leader of the opposition appointed. I recall during my first meeting with Premier Brantley, we raised those discussions, and I did ask him if there was any way that the courtesy could have been extended to myself. I recall Premier Banty stating, well, Cleone, the difficulty is that the then Governor General at the time, Sir Tapley Seaton of blessed memory, that he was of the view that the Constitution of St. Christopher and Nevis did not support it because the NRP, having only one seat, did not command the support of any other person. And so I said thank you, and that is when I really read the Constitution and I understood what that meant. And so it is quite surprising now to hear Mr. Parry say that I did not reach out to him for advice. I have listened to him on other social media platforms stating that he gave me a different advice. Mr. Parry never did that. The second person who I called on that morning was Ashley Farrell. And I said the same thing. I put the same proposal forward. Mr. Farrell was like, well, it's a good proposal. Renaldon is a very good candidate. Put it to the leader and hear what she says. The third person I called, and I hope he can forgive me for calling his name, was Mr. Dave Simon. And I can say on record that Dave told me, Cleone, I am no longer involved in NRP politics, and so therefore I wish you well with that. Put it to the leader and hear what she said. So it is not surprising, as I have alluded many times in the past, that the very next day I reached out to Janice and I put the proposal forward. Now, if any one of those people who I entrusted and who I always, at all material times, from since the inception of my political career and from even before I was elected and after I was elected, I always consult them on matters pertaining to the constituency and pertaining to my political career. So it is very, very vexing and disheartening to me to see that Mr. Parry will now come with a completely different story and to say that he was not consulted. Many of you would recall, and even those colleagues in St. Kitts, during this whole impasse issue, senior politicians would ask him, well, Cleone, what is Mr. Parry's view in this whole thing? What role does he play as an elderly statesman and as a former premier of Nevis and former leader of the Nevis Reformation Party? What does he have to say about this? I said, I don't know. I recall speaking to Mr. Parry initially and he was in full support. I don't know if his view has since changed, and to be honest, I really did not know, because Mr. Parry never gave me the impression, even after our many discussions, that he was adverse to anything that I did. And so to hear him come now and say these things, I am very, very much taken aback. Now, one person asked me recently, Cleone, NRP has maligned you. They have dragged you through the mud and say all manner of things about you, totally assassinated your character, and you have not responded. I said yes, and I thought about it and I said I really have not, for two reasons. One, sometimes you have to wait and bait, and so I was waiting because I know when people like Mr. Parry felt that the dust was settled, that they would come and they would speak, and so I was waiting for that. Also, I had another analogy. If it is that you see someone walking at the edge of a cliff, they are wounded to the extent that they are bleeding and almost near death, and they are on the edge of that cliff walking. You're looking at them and you see them staggering. There's a 90% chance that they may fall over the cliff. Would you go and push them over? I don't think anyone would. Okay? Because then you will be guilty of murder. So for me, I sit back and I let NRP have their doings, knowing fully well that even after they took their action against me to suspend me in the first instance in February 2023, I recall the leader making a public statement coming to say that the party has taken disciplinary actions against Cleone Stapleton-Simmonds for not supporting her as the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, as the leader of the opposition, and also to make it clear that I was suspended from all party activities or representing the party in any capacity. I recall that the budget was coming up very shortly. And I said to myself, well, okay, if I am suspended from the party and from representing the party in any capacity, well, there is only one way for me to continue to represent the people of St. Thomas's. And so when I went into the house, I stated that I am here not representing the Nevis Reformation Party, because at that time I was suspended by the executive. I was here representing the people of Nevis 5 as an independent representative. And so that is how this whole thing came about. Now, I just want to take you back a little bit. Before the whole impasse and during the whole impasse issue, on January 29th, I recall a good gentleman by the name, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me calling his name, by the name of Jonathan. I believe his surname is Maynard. He is a returning national from St. James's, and I recall he was an avid supporter of Janice. He helped her during the campaign, and I would have seen him from time to time, you know, walking around and doing different things. And Jonathan called me one day and he said, Cleone, I am not a member of the NRP executive, but I support the Nevis Reformation Party, and I do not like the approach that the party executive has taken on other members. I do not think that it makes sense to go out there and to attack you publicly the way how those persons and that should tell you went about doing certain things. And so he stated that, would you be willing and interested in a mediation to resolve this issue, because somebody have to do something. And I want to thank him today, because he is the only person who I saw who demonstrated leadership and sensible leadership during this whole impasse issue. Everyone either took a back seat or was out there cussing the life out of Cleone, attacking me. And so I said, okay, fair enough. I went and I participated. The mediation was held on the afternoon of January 29th. With me, I had Mr. Curtis Martin from St. Kitts, because he had helped me significantly during the campaign. Jonathan was present, as well as Mr. Zen Hanley, I believe, and the party leader. We dealt with a number of issues, and I gather from that meeting that the party leader, her concern was that one day I would take over the leadership of the party. I went through extreme lengths during that mediation meeting to advise the party leader that I had absolutely no interest in contesting the leadership. I was aware that a convention was due, and I had already made the decision that I would not partake in any leadership running for leadership. I was not interested in that, because you see, after my experience in the Nevis Reformation Party, I had concluded at that time that was not a party fitting for me to lead. Our values and principles just did not sync. And I told her that. I said I had no interest. I have my children to focus on. This election took everything out of me. It's now time for me to rebuild and to regain focus. I made that clear. The witnesses who were present in that mediation can attest to that. She stated that she had an issue with the senator, and it was her view that she, as the leader of the party, should be able to choose the senator. I said I didn't have any difficulty with that. However, I do believe that we should be able to come to a compromise, because the person who she was recommending, I did not support them for a number of reasons. We had agreed at the end of the mediation, both of us, well, seeing that the two of us have to be in parliament, it really doesn't make sense for us to choose a senator who neither of us would be comfortable with. And so we made the decision that we were not going to go with Mr. Bartlett, and we were not going to go with the other person. I said, okay, fine. The conclusion that we came to on that particular day was that we are going to meet the following Wednesday. This was the 29th, I believe. The following Wednesday might have been the 4th. and I had two other names that I had put forward. I can say who they are publicly. I had put forward in the mediation meeting Desel Nick Hamilton, because I know he had an interest, as well as Eustace Smarty Nisbet. I used the caveat in the meeting to say I had not had discussions with these people. I'm just putting names out there of people who I know I have seen around the party and actively supporting the party. She said that she needed a bit more time to think about her two people, and that we would meet on Wednesday. We agreed that we would meet at 1, I believe it was 1:30 at Indian Summer. On Wednesday, unfortunately, I was in court in St. Kitts at that time, and after I realized I may not have been able to meet the 1:30 meeting, I sent her a message and I said, listen, I'm in court, I'm engaged, I won't be able to make the meeting. Can we do 5:30 that day instead? She indicated that she had a prior engagement for 5:30, and so we can do 5:30 Thursday. That would have been the following day. All of this is via text messages. I said to her on Thursday, she sent me a WhatsApp message. She said that she can't meet again at 5:30 because she have an engagement that popped up. I said, okay, fine. She asked me if Friday. I sent a message to say Friday is a difficult day for me. Fridays are always difficult. It's a day when I am normally in the field, and so I cannot pinpoint an exact time as to when we can meet to resolve this issue on Friday. That was the meeting. Friday came, I didn't hear from her. I really was honestly busy and I did not get a chance to reach out to her. Monday, we didn't contact each other, but I felt that there was still time for us to, tidy up that issue and to move forward. Lo and behold, the NRP executive met on the 8th of February, Tuesday it was, and they made a decision to suspend me from the party. That was made public. On the 9th of February, I recall Miss Party Secretary, General Secretary, coming to my office, and she served me with the decision of the chairman of the executive of the Nevis Reformation Party. And so at that time, I know negotiations were over, and I felt it very hard to accept and believe that the party leader, knowing that we left that meeting with a consensus, with an agreement, still decided that she's going to do a complete 360, and she's going to allow the executive to suspend me from the party. I made no fuss. I allowed NRP to do exactly what they wanted to do all along, because it's only so much that a person can take. The fighting, the lack of support was evident for those who were paying attention. I recall in celebration of my 3rd anniversary as a parliamentarian, I was planning a week of activities, and at that time we had to start a church event. I sat alone at the St. Thomas's Anglican Church by myself in that church. Not one person came to support me, neither from the party executive nor from the St. Thomas's Constituency executive. Many of you would have heard a leak tape from a recording at the St. Thomas's executive body, where persons, and one person in particular, I'm not going to call her name, decided that she had so much hatred in her heart for me that she would have used a machete to chop me up. She was ready to chop me up with her machete. And this is the kind of energy that would come from the Nevis Reformation Party. I recall stating to Mr. Parry on numerous occasions, Mr. Parry, I am having some challenges with this particular executive of St. Thomas's. A number of them were not even elected members of the St. Thomas's constituency executive branch. Some of them said that they were there because Mr. Parry asked them to hold on, even though there was a new executive in place. And they made it extremely difficult for me to be able to function within the constituency. I remember stating to Mr. Parry, I'm having a difficulty with the deputy chairman. I felt that I was being undermined. I want you to come to the group and have a conversation. He cannot deny these things. Mr. Parry never did. He said to me, well, Cleone, I had a conversation with Mr. Daniel. I said, well, Mr. Parry, I asked you for us to have an open forum. So despite all of my struggles, and everyone, prominent members and supporters, key supporters of the Nevis Reformation Party, knew the struggles that I was having from day one. In fact, I recall an occasion, an instance where during an initiative, the party normally do a ham and turkey initiative around Christmas time, and I recall one of the financiers wrote me a letter. I have the letter present here this evening, and I want to read to you, because this is when I realized that this thing, this hatred, this challenge for me was getting out of control. And I reached out to Mr. Parry. I sent him the letter. I reached out to key people in NRP, Mr. Farrell, and I said, listen, we have a problem here. Once you have members or supporters, I don't know who they were and what they were, writing representatives, there's a problem here. This letter was sent to me by the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, coming from her brother, and this is what it stated. Contribution to the purchase of ham, turkey, chicken for Christmas season, and I have consulted my attorney to ensure that I am not breaching anybody's confidentiality or I am not defaming anybody's character. But I must read this letter for you so that you can understand, especially the people of St. Thomas's, that I did not have an easy time in the Nevis Reformation Party. As a matter of fact, the odds were against me from day one. It was reported that a number of monetary donations would be made towards the purchase of frozen ham, turkey, chicken from Value Mart to be distributed during the Christmas season. It was also noted that your portion, and it is written to be, so I assume it is me in my personal capacity, would be 2,000 EC dollars. I don't know who decided that. I'm not aware of that. To date, I have collected more than $10,000 from numerous donors and have paid into Value Mart, but note that your contribution of 2,000 EC dollars remain unpaid. Kindly provide an update regarding same. If in the event you are likely to make this payment, please notify me so that I can request a portion from the other donors. Signed, Dion Daniel. Now, I have never had a conversation with Mr. Daniel or anybody else within the executive of any contribution being made by myself in my personal capacity towards any contribution of ham and turkey. I am not aware of that. So for me, I was advised to put this letter in the out of order bundle, and I did so. I recall stating to the party leader that I was quite surprised that you sent me that letter. But if you and your brother have an issue, I guess you can take legal actions against me, because I am not aware of this. I am not aware of even Mr. Daniel being authorized by the party executive to raise any funds on behalf of the party. These things were not known to me. I don't know if he was. I am just simply saying, as a member of the executive, I was not aware of those discussions or that decision. I recall distinctively having an issue with the way the party does things as it relates to its finances. And as early as August, I believe it was August 27th, at a general council meeting in 2020, when I was vying for the leadership, I made a presentation, and after my experience in the June 2020 federal elections, I stated that the party have an issue and this issue has to be rectified. The party do not have an issue raising finances. The problem is that the finances are raised, but they are not being channeled through the party's treasury. Now, the party go through the process of having a convention, electing a treasurer, electing an assistant treasurer, and monies, donations are raised, but they are not coming to the party. And so it is difficult for members of the party, candidates, constituencies to be able to get money from the party in order to carry out functions within their respective constituencies. I raised the alarm I mentioned it, and the whole meeting erupted. People misunderstood what I was saying, and I believe it was at that point in time when a lot of the members of NRP withdrew their support from me, and perhaps Mr. Parry was one of those persons. Persons have concerns. Okay, if Cleone is the leader, she's going to clean up a lot of things, and how would we be able to make our money? Some supporters actually said that. And I said, this is the issue that I am having. And this issue, I can't say for record purposes, was a major issue in the last election. Because how can you tell me that the party, the Nevis Reformation Party, in 2020 collected, when you check their books, collected zero, no donations to contest a federal election? Nothing is on the party books, merely any donations. In the federal election 2022, the party report, the balance sheet, the party financial report, the treasurer indicated that the party collected, if I recall correctly, about $10,000 in donations, yet still the party was able to contest a major federal election. All of us know political parties have major expenses in terms of flights if you have to bring in people, just on the ground preparing for election day, in terms of rentals, tents, all of these things, miscellaneous expenses and other expenses, they have to be taken care of. So how can you contest a major election when your books is only reflecting $10,000 in donations? Same thing happened in December 2022. Again, party collected, I believe it was $46,000 in donations. So I am asking the question, well, who is paying for all of the other associated expenses? I can say clearly on the record that from the time I entered the Nevis Reformation Party, the party has never given me not even 1 cent to do anything within my constituency. And I want people to know that, because a lot of people out there talking and they're saying a lot of things, and they're talking about, oh, you're running a party ticket. But where was the finances from the party? Nothing was ever given to me. I have had numerous functions in my constituency. I have had a number of drives, from school back to school drive to food drives, as early as June 2020 when I first became elected. And I want people to know everything, the majority of your things that you saw me do in St. Thomas's for the good people of St. Thomas's, a lot of those things I either had to go out there and raise money myself, or it was financed from my own pockets. So I hear people talking and they're saying all kind of things, how, oh, you running a party ticket, where was the financial support? And this was the issue. I said this is going to create a problem, because if you're not able to pool resources together, then it means candidates are going to have to go out there and raise funds however they can in order to be able to successfully contest the elections. And then once that happens, how then can you say the candidates who are running on a party ticket? As far as I am aware, and I often say this to people without any water in my mouth, even though I was a part of the Nevis Reformation Party, I contested 2 elections almost as an independent candidate, because I did not get the support. There were private donors and supporters of NRP who I reached out to and who would say, Cleone, we can give you these donations. Sometimes, especially in the last election, I was informed. I was much surprised at the eve of the election. This is less than a week before the election. I reached out to the party leader and I said, what is in place? What is in place to contest this election? Where is the money? Oh, the party don't have any money. I said, well, how do we intend to win? She indicated, well, she took a personal overdraft or personal loan in order from Development Bank in order for her to be able to contest her seat or the constituency that she was contesting. I said, okay, Well, I am not in a financial position to take a loan for the party. And if it comes down to me having to take a loan to contest an election, it means though that NRP is now becoming an additional liability to myself. And so therefore, I now have to consider whether I need to really participate in these elections. I said all of those things. She said, Cleone, there is a donor who can loan you this money, but you have to sign a loan agreement. I said, not me. I was willing to at first, but then upon second thought and upon consultation with my husband was like, no, you are not going to be involved in that. Okay? You guys had so many time excess to prepare for an election, and now an election is coming. You're saying to me that there is no resources. On that eve, I had to turn to numerous persons who I am grateful, very grateful for their assistance. And through them, we were able to raise some funds, not enough funds. There were some people who were upset, those overseas naturally, where I was not in a position to be able to provide tickets for them to come home. I'm sorry. I explained to those persons. Some of them got disgruntled and upset, and they were upset with the party, but they truly did not understand the finances. I recall on election day, I was standing with a gentleman from my constituency talking to him, and it was about 12:30 on election day. We were in Jessops, and he said to me, Cleone, I'm sorry for you, because we are getting reports on the ground that there are other constituencies that is flooded with money, and we don't see any activity taking place in St. Thomas's. And we understood what that meant. We understood that this was a fight against you. People actually wanted you to lose, but do not worry, because we have your back. The young fellas in St. Thomas's, those in Cotton Ground, those in Jessops, they really had my back, and I want to take this opportunity to thank them tremendously, because they understood. And they said, Cleone, don't worry. At that time, while I am there having that conversation with that young gentleman, my phone rang, and it was the leader of the party, and she said, Cleone, I have something for you to give to the party. I said, okay, no problem. She said, what's your location? I said, I'm in Jessops, but I'm heading to Cotton Ground now to see what's happening over there. She said, okay, I'm going to bring something for you. She eventually did at about 3:30. I took it and I gave it to the treasurer of the party. And I'm not going to disclose the amount, okay? And perhaps I should. I received 2,000 EC dollars for the entire campaign for the local election for 2020. That's what I received. I gave it to the treasurer. We had a laugh about it, because the person said, Cleone, really? And I said, yes. So I want people to understand that my journey here has not been easy. So when I see people like Mr. Parry coming forward now, the dust is settled, and giving the impression that I have done something to the good people of St. Thomas's, and stating that I have turned my back on the people of St. Thomas's and on the party, and I have even to the extent going further to say I have crossed the floor, I want to say to Mr. Parry that you owe me a public apology, and you need to retract those statements, because you very well knew the suffering and the sacrifices that I made for the Nevis Reformation Party. You knew so personally, because I used to reach out to you. So if it is that you withdraw support from me, because as former leader of NRP and as the premier of Nevis, you are NRP and you remain NRP, that is the natural expectation. I expect that. But you decide that you are going to withdraw support from me, then Mr. Parry, say that. But please, for God's sake, do not say to the people of St. Thomas's that I have turned my back on them, because that is not true, and the people of St. Thomas's know that. I have not crossed any floor. I am not a member of CCM. I did a show for the 40th anniversary on my legendary program some weeks ago with the premier of Nevis. We had a frank discussion. I see NRP was able to take that interview and use it on their very own Tell You show. And so I am just simply saying that as politicians, and to exhibit political maturity in this country, we must be able to have open and frank discussions with other parliamentarians. Mr. Parry used to do it. I recall him stating that sometimes he would meet with the Premier Brantley at that time, and he would give him advice. That is not unusual, but we need to stop sending messages out there to our supporters and take opportunity as parliamentarians, present and past, to educate people and to let them know that there's absolutely nothing wrong with negotiating and compromising and having open and frank discussions with members from the opposite side. There is no need, and I have heard the Premier on numerous occasions come on his show and make an appeal to parliamentarians, particularly leaders of political party, to engage their constituents and to tell them, listen, there is no need to cuss and to abuse and threaten people with violence. I have heard that. I support that, because really there is no need for it. And for someone who has experienced character assassination that is beyond any precedent that has been set on the shores of St. Kitts and Nevis and perhaps in the wider Eastern Caribbean, I can say to you that I believe that is not the way to go. And so I expected better from Mr. Parry to stand up, even though he disagreed, to stand up and to have the guts and to be courageous enough to say, listen, I do not agree with Cleone, but I am calling on this personal attack on her to stop. Mr. Parry said I never reached out to him for advice, and he don't know who is advising me. So therefore, from his very own words, one can conclude that he has not sat down with me to hear my side of the story. So how can you form an opinion? How can you form an informed opinion? This thing needs to stop. I, as a young politician, I am 40, the same age as an independent St. Kitts and Nevis. I refuse to continue this rhetoric. I refuse to continue to be a part of the antagonizing and part of the cussing and a part of this type of aggressive and abrasive politics that the NRP is accustomed to but has not taken them anywhere. I want to remind the general public that the Nevis Reformation Party so far has contested from the period of 1992 to present 16 elections, and they have only won one election. It means that something is wrong. The formula, the equation is not working. You have to consider doing things differently. This constant cussing and abusing of people and really assassinating their character and trying to crush people. I have heard supporters and people advocate not even one person should vote for Cleone. Do not support her business. So I am not supposed to eat in this country because of a simple falling out, a simple disagreement, because of the leader of the party former party failure to compromise. That is what this is leading to the extent that people are out there advocating and promoting violence. And I am yet to hear any civic body in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, any Christian council, any pastor call in on these programs and said, no, this is wrong. I am yet to hear them. So it makes you wonder, where is our moral compass in this country? Where do we lie? Where is our value? How can we move forward to progress a country economically and to be sustainable and to continue to grow if we are not on the same page as parliamentarians, where we can get our people, the people who we influence and the people who we are in charge of, to be able to understand that that is not the way. That is not the way to go. It is not benefiting anybody. And so I'm making a call, a plea, a public plea to those persons who are accustomed to this type of politics to cease and desist. I am also making a public call to the Honorable Joseph Parry, someone who, as I told you before, my grandmother felt was a god, someone who I respected as a father figure, someone who I grew up with and who used to take care of me, to cease and desist from maligning my name and from spreading false information about me. I am calling on him to do that because he has sufficient influence in the Nevis Reformation Party to change the dialogue. He does. And as an elderly statesman, a former premier of Nevis, someone who people look up to within the constituency of Nevis 5, we expect better and you ought to do better. I just want for this brief moment to play a simple recording. And this is the voice of the first Premier of Nevis, and that is Sir Simeon Daniel, our national hero.
I have known the Honourable Mark Brantley for all of his life. He always strives for excellence, and he has been successful in most of his endeavors. He has one of the best legal minds in the Caribbean. Some people hate or jealous him for that. He does not fear criticism from his peers or those who try to emulate him but cannot attain. He is a role model for young Nevisians. I am certain that he will use his skill and education to preserve the legacy which our forefathers have bequeathed to us. These are honesty, self-worth, and an independent mind. To the young people of Nevis, I urge you to protect and defend what your forefathers have achieved for you. Support the Honourable Mark Brantley, and he will make sure of that. Vote for the man who will protect our Constitution. Vote for the man who is fearless and who will not become a political pygmy.
As an endorsement, I played that not really as an endorsement to Premier Brantley, because of course that is not my interest. I played that to show that the late Sir Simeon Daniel, national hero and father of the now leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, he supported Premier Mark Brantley. I am told that he supported him personally. He supported him. He ensured that he had an education, and his support continued for Premier Brantley even when he transitioned his political career to become a member and eventually a candidate and eventually the Premier of Nevis for the Concerned Citizen Movement. And I say that to say, Mr. Parry, and just in comparison, Mr. Parry took the credit, and he said that he brought me to NRP, and when all was well, he was very proud to take the credit for bringing me to the Nevis Reformation Party. I had two jobs. In the by-election, I was asked to go out there and contest the seat and win the seat for the Nevis Reformation Party. Second time around, in the last local election, I was asked to do the same thing, despite the odds were against me, because at that time I was fighting both NRP and CCM. There were some new transitional and transactional persons who were formerly supporters of CCM who found their way up in the ranking of NRP, and so they were out there actively against me. So I was fighting two parties. That was not easy. Most people before me, my predecessors, were only fighting one opposition, and that was the opposition party. For me, I was fighting two sets of people. And so I want people to know one of the things that I admire about Sir Sim, and I don't know from that, I will not make any conclusions as to who he was supporting when he made that statement back in 2012. But what I can tell you, he continued to give his support to the Honorable Mark Brantley, because that is what people do when they genuinely and authentically support somebody from day one. It was not just about the politics. Now, I don't know if his allegiance may have changed from NRP to CCM. I can't say. One can make that assumption based on his statement. I am not going to do that. I'm going to leave that up to the good people listening to the sound of my voice. But what I can tell you is that his support continued throughout, and that is what you do. That is what you do as an elderly person, as a statesman, as someone who has been there and who has walked the roads, I am sure that Sir Sim did not agree with everything that Premier Brantley do. I am certain of that. I am sure that there were times that he may have had disappointments. There are times that maybe they would have had quiet conversations where he may have expressed his disappointment. I don't know, perhaps these things happen, but one thing I wanted to compare and contrast and show that he never ridiculed Premier Brantley. His support continued throughout, and that is testimony to me, for any person, particularly those from St. Albert's who I may have to support in future. Once you give somebody your support and you take them under your wing and you bring them and you went out there and you sought them out and you bring them, Mr. Parry, my expectation of you was for you to continue that journey, even when you were in disagreement with me. Some people may say, well, Cleone, are you asking Mr. Parry to support you over the NRP? I am not saying that. I am simply saying I did not do anything to NRP. NRP decided that the approach that they would take was to first suspend me and then eject me from their party, because the leader of the party felt more comfortable with Cleone being outside of the party. And this is all that it came down to. Okay, so I want to assure the people of St. Thomas's that I will continue to represent you to the best of my ability. I cannot be responsible. It's a democratic process, as Mr. Parry said, in the NRP. I believe that every single one of you have a right to vote to whoever presents themselves to you. And I want to make it absolutely clear that I do intend to continue my political journey, whether Mr. Parry and others feel that I am damaged goods. That is a matter for the people, for the good people of St. Albert's, who I have served with distinction and will continue to serve with distinction, because I understand this fight is not my fight. This fight is for the people of St. Thomas's, especially the people of Cotton Ground, who have all kind of things over there, who need attention and care. That lady who came to me today with her drainage issue, that young man who constantly remind me, Cleone, we need facilities at the Cotton Ground playfield, and I continue to advocate. I continue to hold the government. I continue to write to the Premier. I continue to have discussions. I continue to fight for my people. I am aware of the issues, and that is what I get up and do on a daily basis. It is unfortunate the way how things turned out, as Mr. Parry said, but I want him to retract his statement, because the way things turned out were not my doing alone. It was not my doing alone. I told you there was a mediation meeting. The leader agreed, and then despite agreeing in that mediation meeting before the mediators and other witnesses, she decided that she's going to take a complete turn without even notifying me. I never had a fair hearing. There was no due process of the law. The party wrote to me, the executive constructed and implemented a disciplinary committee to deal with me. Chairing that disciplinary committee was one person who I recall in 2013 when NRP lost. She was one of the first person appointed to a board for the government solid waste board. I recall those things, so that tell me that those people were not always supporters of NRP, simply because the CCM that I know, the government will not appoint any member of NRP to sit on any board belonging to CCM. So like I told you, there is now an influx of person within the NRP who call themselves NRP but who are transitional and transactional. And I wish to end there. I wish to thank all of you for your time. I wish to encourage the good people of St. Thomas's, those of you who are supporting me and who have stuck with me throughout, who understood and who saw me and who know the real story. I want to thank you. Thank you so much for your continued support, and I have every confidence that if and when I do decide to put myself in the ring in the next election, that I will continue to have your support. Let us continue to work together to build Nevis progressively and peacefully. Thank you so much for tuning in.
views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited or its advertisers.
With all the power from the tower.